Welcome, everyone, to the Sasquatch Outpost podcast, episode 55 tonight. We're actually in our official second season of the Outpost podcast. We ended after our first year, our first season, and we are into season 2. So don't be surprised if you see some upcoming graphic changes to our intro and to the thumbnail and things like that, just to keep it fresh and exciting. And also, I realized that the intro, Steph and I were trying to sort this out just before the podcast. Let me just do something here real quick. But I know the volume is too loud on the intro. We were trying to sort that out, but it was too much to try and get done before. We'll get that figured out by next week. So I apologize for you having to turn your volume down for the intro and turn it back up for the show. We will sort that out by next time. I can almost promise that will happen. Today was a weird day. We've got some things that I'm going to talk to you about with Wayne. Wayne and I went out for some squatching and looking for tracks in the snow, and weird things happened. And some weird things happened after I got home. But we'll tell you about that in a minute. But we've got some quick upcoming events here. Let's just show that. So we've got a cave talk on April 13th at the Outpost Cave Room. We can fit 25. We've got about 10 people booked right now for that cave talk. So if you want to be a part of that, you can go on to sasquatchoutpost.com, Rabbit Hole Adventures tab, and book your place for that cave talk. And it should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Then we've got Bigfoot Days in Estes Park coming up on the 20th of April. If anyone's interested in doing the barbecue the night before, I'm not part of that. But the other speakers will be there. And the speakers this year are Renee from the show Animal Planet Finding Bigfoot, which is no longer being recorded. I mean, you can see past episodes, but they're not doing a new season. And then Expedition Bigfoot, Russell Accord and Ronnie LeBlanc are both going to be there. And I will be, oh, look at that, Steph. My text went off the page again. At 10:15 in the morning, I'm going to be doing a podcast from Bigfoot Days, and I'll be interviewing either Russell or Ronnie or both for my podcast. And we're going to have a live audience, and we're going to give people the opportunity to ask questions from the audience. So it should be a fun show. And I encourage, if any of you are going to be there, to come see us in our booth, the biggest booth that is going to be out there, and the busiest booth by a long stretch. And then shortly after things get open to come right in the building right next to where all the fair booths are going to be, will be my podcast in the, I think it's the city council room, if I'm not mistaken. And then on the 25th of May, I've been invited to come speak with Jeff Meldrum and Daniel Toth for the big conference, Bigfoot Investigative Group. It's a new research group that started here in Colorado. The members are all former Navy SEALs from around the country, some of them from Colorado. And so I was asked to come speak on the 25th. I think the cost for the day conference is $120, which includes lunch. So just know that will give you a good box lunch, and it's going to be held at the Omni Interlaken, I think, resort in Broomfield. So you can book on their website, which is BigfootInvestigativeGroup.com. And they're having some trouble with their website and getting the bookings right. If you go on there and you can't book it, let me know, and I will get back with Daniel and figure out what's going on with that. So let's bring Wayne in. I wanted Wayne to come join me in this first part here to talk about. Hey, Wayne. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Hey, Jim. There you go.
So Wayne and I went out to drive around in the snow, looking for some tracks. So let's do that first video, not the horse one, but the other one, Steph. I mean the first. So this was Wayne. We were going down the road, and Wayne says, "Wait, stop, go back." And you can see in front of Wayne, it looks like some big impressions in the snow. And Wayne climbed up there to see what and they were pretty far apart. Didn't you say, Wayne, when you got up?
About 7 feet, somewhere apart.
And I told Wayne, I thought, I'll let you guys give your opinion. I thought that this is made by mule deer that are, when the snow is deep, they jump to wherever they're going. It's hard for them to walk through it. So that's because there were kind of two side-by-side deep impressions in the snow, and they were consistent. I mean, the distance could have been a Sasquatch, but the shape and everything, I don't know what you thought, Wayne, but I think it was deer.
I agree with you. It just seemed, number one, I would have expected to see some type of debris on the front side of the track if they're leaping out of the snow, which I didn't see. And the distance between the tracks was unusual. I wouldn't think a deer could jump that far in that deep snow.
Yeah,
but it was interesting.
Yeah, so we drove on down a ways, went on a couple back roads, and I can't remember what I had on the next slide, but so this is an arch. Now I know some of you get bored with this kind of stuff, but the left-hand video, our left-hand slide is an arch that on the right-hand side, you can see that it's pegged into the ground. It was actually planted in the ground. And so I find these everywhere. Wayne and I find these everywhere. And, trees don't plant themselves on both ends. So this was something that did that. And then we drove farther, and we just find these weird trees. This S-shaped tree in the midst of all these other trees that are straight up and down. And I didn't know if this could have been a native spirit tree or something else, but it's just strange that one tree by itself would have that strange shape.
Yeah. That
to me looks like it was manipulated early in life. Well, I mean, no way to know that for sure, but I'd be interested to see what Doug or some of the other guys, native guys in the chat, think about that tree. Let me know what you think. And then what's the next one? So we're driving along, and we come on three cop cars this is a back road, right? There were 3 Jefferson County police vehicles there, and we're passing by them, and I'm looking at the cops, and Wayne, as we're passing by, Wayne is looking out the other window, and he goes, "Help me." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "That's what's written on the side of this trailer. Help me." And so I looked, and sure enough, you can't see the me. The P and the me are inside under the screen. We could see it. And so we passed by, and I got to the top of the hill, and I said, "No, I got to take a picture of that. I don't know what's going on with that." So I turned around, went back down to the bottom of the hill, took a picture. The cops were totally rude to us, and said, "Move on. We're here for a reason." Oh, look on the snow, Wayne. I just noticed.
Yeah, it said help there also.
Help on the snow.
Yeah.
So
I just noticed that too.
We didn't know. They didn't offer any explanation, but there were 3 cop cars there. I don't know if somebody was in there deceased or what was going on, but yeah, that I just noticed on the snow. So they did have a can of spray paint that they were using. I guess.
The other bizarre thing is, where's the vehicle that brought that thing there?
Say that again.
Where's the vehicle that brought that?
Yeah, there was no vehicle that brought that pop-up to that location. And so we don't know. We don't know. We were just guessing on the way home what was going on with that trailer. But that's kind of scary. That's always kind of in the back of your mind when you're camping on your own, if there are people with bad intentions out there who might do things to hurt you.
Hey, Jim, real quick, if you check out John Ayer's comment there about that S-shaped tree, it's where Home Depot gets their 2x4s. Good call, Jim.
Yeah, I love that. That is classic. Good yeah, because you have to pull all these boards out, and you look at one, no, that's crooked. You look at another one, no, that's warped. That's warped. So you're right, John. Even worse, some other hardware stores, at least Home Depot's got enough selection that you can find usually one straight one. So then, Wayne, after I got home, as soon as I got home, I'm sitting at my desk getting ready for the show. So the friend who was with me the day I got kicked by the horse, she calls me up, and I'm like, "Hey, Molly, what's going on?" She goes, "So my horse's mane is braided now." Oh, I was like, "No way." So she's got this huge Percheron horse. And so I went out there. I left my desk, and it's just across the road from me, and drove over there. And so there was this little horse with a braided mane. Let's show that first one. This horse had 2 braids now. It only had one the time I saw it before. And the next one's kind of closer up on. So there's a double braid on the left, and then this tiny little braid on the right. And that was new. I tell you, this horse always looks like sad sack. This horse looks so sad all the time. I don't know what's going on, but, and I think I show another picture of that braid? No. And then this is her horse. Now this is a huge horse. This horse is like 18 hands tall, if you know horse measurement. And I mean, he's really tall. And so he has this braid, and you can see on the right, I tried to pull it towards me a little bit. It's braided, loosely braided, and then tied in a knot on the bottom. So Saturday, I think I'm going to go over there and cut this off. She's willing for me to cut it off his mane. And Doug Hychek, in the new book, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science 2, is very intrigued by these braids. So he and I are working on getting some evidence for the movie. And so I've got lots of photos from this one pasture, and it's bizarre. So it was so funny that she was commenting to me like, "Yeah, I've never heard of that." And then her horse gets his mane braided. And so it's not just mares, it's geldings as well. Wow. And so this, and she's willing to put a body cam on him. So I wrote Doug and I said, "Look, if you've got a body cam that we can get on this horse, hopefully no one will steal it. But if we can put it on him and let him at night see if anything comes up to him or comes up to the horses that he's around, and see if we can get some footage of something. And
Wow.
we can only try. We'll see
That's
what
good
happens.
information about both mares and geldings.
Yeah, definitely. So, any other thoughts, Wayne, on when we were out there? We didn't get stuck, which is a good thing.
That was a good thing. I was proud of you. You did a great job. You kept us on the road.
Yeah, awesome.
In fact, I was thinking about when I got home, you were talking about wanting to take that person out back there, that president. And I was like, he needs to sit in the front seat and he'll have this real good day.
there you go. I want to introduce you guys to Brent. I'll maybe do this next week. I can't remember how much I've got going on, but I want to introduce you to the president of the Sasquatch Outpost fan club. And it's been too long, and I need to get him on the show to introduce you to him. So,
but Jim, anytime I get to spend out with you is good time, quality time. I had a great day.
Thanks.
So
yeah, that was great. You bet. Let's see. Walk the perimeter around what, John? I'm not sure what you're referring to there. And then John Lamb, let's put his comment up there. Most horses get scared and run. I don't know how they calm them down, John. It's a question we've been asking for years. They obviously have to be standing still to braid it, because if they were moving around too much, you could not braid their mane. So I don't know what they do. They have some ability to calm them down. So, all right, Wayne, I'll say goodbye for now, but thanks for coming in, bro.
All right, brother. Anytime. It's my pleasure.
Take care, man. Yeah, you bet.
All right.
So, let me show you a quick little video. I created a new display in the back, and before you play it, let me just explain stuff. So, I think I've mentioned this. Some guys originally from Omaha, when his name is Gary Bouvier, and when Gary was a kid, he and his dad were part of the same Boy Scout troop, and his dad was one of the scout leaders, and they took a trip here to Colorado in the summer, middle of the summer, July, August, to do a high altitude survival training. So they all got in this big yellow school bus, drove down 2 days down from Omaha to, I think it was Roosevelt National Forest. And they were up there doing their survival training. And his dad had brought along this 8mm camera, movie camera. And you had to wind them up, put your cartridge of film in, close it up, wind the camera up, when you wanted to film something, you'd hit this button and it would play until you stopped it. So it was all mechanical, no infrared, no batteries, nothing. And one day he's filming and he sees something across the lake from wherever he was filming. And so he films it. Now, if you've ever tried to film through an 8mm camera, it's a tiny little hole. I'll show you in the video. I have this little display to show people how hard it was to film with an 8mm camera, because the film itself is, tiny like this. And anyway, he sees something across the lake. There was still a snowbank there, even though it's middle of the summer, which isn't unusual in Colorado. He sees this big figure come out of the trees, jumps. There were some rocks, boulders in the snow. It jumps across these boulders, steps down in the snow, and turns and looks at him across the lake, and then walks into the trees. So Finding Bigfoot, Moneymaker's show back at the time, found out about this. And when they came to do their Colorado episode, they had Gary come down to Colorado. They interviewed him. They showed the footage and did an investigation to determine if this could be the first earliest footage of Bigfoot that was filmed in 1962. That's when they did their trip, 1962. If it is a Bigfoot, it predates Patterson-Gimlin by 5 years. So I last year I got a phone call from Gary, and he wanted to donate the original 8mm movie, the camera his dad used, the backpack that his dad wore, photos of all kinds of stuff with Finding Bigfoot cast, and which was awesome. Gary, if you watch this program, again, I want to say thank you to you and your family for trusting us and donating all these items to the museum. And now I've finished a display that you can see the next time you come in. So let's just play this little video. And that's the camera on the left with the case hanging from it. The video is playing there. Got a picture of the scout troop. That's a 8mm movie projector. That's how you had to watch these movies. There's the Finding Bigfoot crew and cast. Wooden backpacks. Can you imagine what that was like to wear a wooden backpack, wooden frame backpack that they built themselves? This is a new thing we've just done in the museum, where we want people to tell us where they're from and put pins in the maps of Colorado, the U.S., and the world. And next time you guys come in, you can put a new video or put a new pin in the map to tell us where you're from. So that's a fun display. Can't say definitively if that's a Sasquatch or not. I think it very well could be, but that's still for you to evaluate and let us know what you think. So anyway, new display, fun display for us in the museum that we just finished. And we're actually starting some demo upstairs, demolition of some things to get ready to build our new Bigfoot themed escape room. So that's to come. All right. I think that's all the housekeeping I wanted to go over. So my guest today for the podcast is Rob Alley. Let's go ahead and bring Rob in. Rob, good to see you, my friend.
Hey, Jim, good to see you.
So Rob is a Bigfoot researcher. He's also an author. Let's throw up that slide with his books, Raincoat Sasquatch and Brushes with Bigfoot. Do you have a third book, Rob, or just these two?
No, the third one will probably be out sometime later this year. Probably.
Okay. Good. So, and Rob is a retired chiropractor and physical therapist. I don't know what you call those two together. Chirotherapist, which is impressive. I'm impressed that you were able to do both of those professions. That's a accomplishment in and of itself.
I think I was lucky that I was able to keep licenses in one jurisdiction for one profession and another jurisdiction.
Okay.
But my first degree was anthropology, along with zoology and linguistics.
Okay.
I always maintained a being as an anthropologist in all my work in both Canada and the U.S. among native populations.
Now, are you Canadian?
I'm Canadian by birth, yes.
By birth, okay. And you currently live in Olympia, Washington, is that correct?
I do, yeah.
So, Rob, there's a couple of reasons why I was looking forward to having you on tonight. I know you've done a lot of research on the native, both in Canada and the U.S., the native North American perspective on Sasquatch, which I want to hear all about what you've learned over the years. But first of all, I know our folks would love to hear a little bit about you, your background, your family, and how you got into this topic, which is always kind of a fascinating talk.
I guess, everybody hears about one aspect or another of this. And the Patterson-Gimlin film was certainly influential in 1967 when I was just starting at the university, or, a high school student. And and getting into zoology. So I was interested in that. And I grew up in a multicultural community. Manitoba, you'll hear every language going under the sun. And it's right in the center of Canada. So it's where a lot of different, European, American, European, Canadian languages meet. But I was lucky enough to grow up in the 50s with a family cabin that was out in extreme eastern Manitoba near the Northwest Angle. And at that time, we had moose. We had all sorts. I actually got knocked out of a canoe by a moose. I would call the wolves in the wintertime. At the age of 12, I was just a nature geek.
Not many people can say that, Rob, that you were knocked out of a canoe by a moose.
There are a lot of Boy Scouts from the Fort Garry 99th United Troop who would still remember that canoe trip where my partner and I were lifted up by a moose that was surfacing like a submarine right underneath the canoe. Much to the clarity. But anyway, the RCMP and the conservation officers in Manitoba in the 60s were very open about the fact that they were looking at big footprints, out in the bush in remote parts of Manitoba. And Manitoba has a lot of remote parts. So, I wasn't surprised. And I was studying physical anthropology as well as zoology. So human evolution and primates. And I got a chance to work with some hominids, some hominoids at the Winnipeg Zoo family. So who mate for life and have funny coloration patterns and so on. Whoop, that sort of vocalization. So I was already interested in Sasquatches, which to me had a reality in 1968. So by the time I finished my degree, I discovered that not all professors in anthropology could agree on Sasquatch. There were the physical anthropologists who said there's nothing out there. And then there were the cultural anthropologists who said, well, yeah, there might have been something because these legends exist. These oral traditions, not just legends, but myth and oral traditions, folklore, which in Canada is admissible in court.
Imagine that people would not agree on the topic of Sasquatch.
So I was really lucky to have one professor, Skip Coolidge, Dr. W.W. Coolidge, who'd not only taught ethnography and was a scholar of the Chipewyan Athabascan Manitobans who lived up west of Churchill, the extreme eastern Athabascans in North America. So Athabascans, or the Dene peoples, extend from all over central Alaska, right through the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, northern BC, northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan to northern Manitoba. And he said, he encouraged me to look at this. He didn't come right out and say it, but he said, Bob, I also have a PhD in physical anthropology. And he was one of two anthropologists who had both physical and ethnographic PhDs. And that means that they read the oral traditions of Sunukwa and Wendigo and Sasquatches by any of the 400 names. But they'd also studied possible fossil candidates, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis. Gigantopithecus was a popular candidate in the early days. But for me, it was always just a giant orangutan, a giant ancient relative of, and I had to go with what I ended up.
Oh, nice.
Seeing a living representative of in British Columbia on Labor Day, 1975.
That's a replica of a Gigantopithecus?
Looked more like a giant caveman, a giant Peking man, or a giant Java man with hair all over. And it just didn't have those ape-like simian qualities that we see reconstructions of Gigantopithecus looking like. So what I've seen with my eyes in Alaska and in British Columbia could be just nothing more than a giant, let's say, Bergman's rule, super evolved through the Pleistocene, much larger than Meganthropus. Meganthropus was that giant man that was discovered by von Koningswald in Java, and it's called Sangrian 6. Cut to the chase, everybody argues about what Meganthropus is. That's Homo erectus paleojavanicus, Sangrian 6. There are various names for what these jaw fragments actually were attached to, since all we have are jaw fragments and some skull fragments. But they would have been absolutely huge. I mean, look at the size of this.
And how, like in the evolution of Homo sapiens, where would these fit in the evolution of?
Really, probably capable of still sharing, successfully sharing and hybridizing with us even today.
Okay.
That's where they would fit in our direct ancestry, or just off to one side of it. In the last 2 million years, this is all, I don't know. It's all hypothetical.
Sure.
And you have to remember that everyone has their own pet theory of what ancient hominid or ape or whatever might be an ancestor of modern Pandec. Africa, Europe still seems to have beings like this reported. But the natives, they'll say, well, I'm going to read you some native material. This is the illustration that I drew based on what I had seen. Okay, and it's in my book. And I did that sketch over a period of 2 days following the sighting that I had. For one moment, outside my tent, very close by, and I could tell you a little bit about that story. Everyone was sleeping. The pebbles had been landing on my tent fly. For every 5 minutes, I'd fall asleep and I'd be woken up again by these pebbles. And my girlfriend was asleep. Everybody woke up when I stepped outside and shone a flashlight on what I thought was going to be some high school prankster from Campbell River.
Yeah.
And it was blowing my mind that with that dust, that fine silt on a logging road that hasn't seen rain for a week, Jim, you can see every little mouse track, every chipmunk track on that.
Sure.
Here. So I was really surprised when I, kept waking up because I couldn't figure out how he got up this, 45 minutes of hiking to get up to where we were above the highway, upper Campbell Lake, without leaving a track. So
interesting.
It was crazy. So that's what's in my mind. I'm expecting a kid. And instead, and I'm standing, actually relieving myself, to be honest, in the fireweed and the salmonberry and the 12-foot reproduction hemlock and cedar Douglas fir next to the tent. It's an old logging landing, little clearing. Our two tents, my roommate and his girlfriend, and me and my girlfriend. So I'm looking at the Sasquatch, about 15, no more than 15 feet away, possibly 12. And he was well over 7 feet tall. I would say 7.5, dark brown. And, when I shone my little flashlight at his legs, I was in awe. And I kind of leaned back a little bit. And when I did so, my flashlight went up further and I caught a glimpse of his face. And he looked almost surprised. And it was kind of a half smile, like, hey, you're not your girlfriend. You're not. So
yeah.
As soon as the light hit his face, he turned, I want to say, like a quarterback, an NFL quarterback, fading back when all the linemen are after him, pivots and is smashing his way through the darkness. And all of this logging slash that you and I would take an hour to go 100 yards in just because it's so, everything's jumbled up and,
Yeah.
you know what it's like, especially West Coast. So the details are there. But can I help you by going back to what some natives have to say
sure.
from Alaska, where I worked for 24 years. So today you'll hear hairy man. For example, if you go on Fred Roll's website, Subarctic Alaska Sasquatch, you'll get a whole lot of emails and stories that Fred investigated, his own personal.
Actually, he's my guest next week.
Well, that's wonderful. Fred's a great guy, and he is very, very thorough. He's also an accomplished hunter, outdoorsman, and tracker. Get him on. Your audience will love that. But let me bring the big picture. Now, Fred is from Dillingham, and that's his tribal ethnic group there. And I will try to show you in this little picture if I can. Let's see.
There you go.
Dillingham in Alaska at the bottom of the screen. This is Big Mainland Alaska.
Okay.
And I live in Southeast Alaska, which is down this way, the Long Panhandle. So here's the Gulf. Here's the Gulf of Alaska. Okay. And Dillingham is right. Give me a second here. Kenai Peninsula. That's Dillingham right there. So you're going to hear there's Yupik. There's a lot of Yupik and I want to say Sugston. You could say Aleut. Fred will give you exact, ethnic definitions of his group. So you'll hear these stories. But among all these Athabascan and these Eskimo, and I better not say that, Inupiaq and Yupik related, we used to call that Eskimo, their stories are a little different. And the Athabascans have what I'm going to give you here, right down to the middle of British Columbia. And there are a few Athabascan tribes, Dene speaking tribes in Oregon, and I think one in Washington. But let me just get into this for you. So encountering the Bushmen, the name that used to be used was Bushman when the natives were speaking in English. In their own language, I'll tell you what those names were. Today we hear hairy man instead of brushman or bushman.
Right.
Say Bigfoot, but they're very specific. So let's listen to what these people have to say. Now you're talking about where the forests are starting to thin out, and you're getting mixed forest with tundra and muskeg, as well as mountains. So the Kutchin people that live right up against the Yukon, right up against Canada here, along the Yukon border, are Dene-speaking people living in the northeastern edge of Alaska's boreal spruce forest, okay? And they're traditional hunters of caribou, bear, and more recently moose. Stories of Bigfoot-like creatures are just one part of their rich oral tradition. The Gwich'in, their ancestral homeland, covers all of the upper drainages of the Yukon River in Alaska, as well as adjacent areas of the Yukon region of Canada. Okay, so they're kind of dual citizens. The climate varies from extremely cold in the wintertime, 40, 50 below, to around 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, with precipitation average about 12 inches or less. The terrain it includes open mountains and flatter spruce-filled valleys, sloughs and ponds, and stunted birch and willow thickets. So it's abundant with berries and other edible plants. Geese, ducks, grouse, and ptarmigan, moose, caribou, porcupine, snowshoe hare, brown and black bear, wolves, wolverines, marten, beaver, muskrats, and many other species of mammals and birds occupy the land. Salmon and other fish are in those rivers and are also an important food item for the Kutchin as well as for the predators that stalk this vast land. So when anthropologist Cornelius Osgood lived with and wrote of the Kutchin in 1936, he noted many of the same beliefs regarding Bushmen or Brushmen as held by other Danes, okay? And other researchers also documented persistent and unshakable Athabascan beliefs in the continuing existence of a race of wild, hair-covered beings. Cornelius Osgood and the others quoted ethnographer Michael Mason's brief description in The Arctic Forests, that's Mason's book, The Arctic Forests, of beings which loosely fit the general description of Sasquatches or Bigfoot elsewhere. And I'll quote him. Mason said, "Another type of spirits is the Mahoney, terrible wild men with, with red eyes and of enormous height." Remember, this is 1936, he's writing this.
Right.
Completely covered with long hair. They live without any fires and whenever possible, eat human flesh. A Mahoney leaves man-like footprints, okay, and will eat a whole birch tree torn up by the roots, only throwing away the twigs. Mason, 1924, actually, he wrote that. Osgood noted in the article, The Ethnography of the Great Bear Lake Indians, these creatures inhabit a specific region around the headwaters of the Porcupine and Peel Rivers. 1931, pages 85 to 86. He also quoted Mason's description of the Tinje Rui. The Tinje Rui, or brushman, from his book, The Arctic Forests. So here's another description. He's very tall and thin with a black face and yellow eyes. So we've heard of red eyes, now we're getting yellow. He possesses miraculous powers of locomotion, and his chief amusement appears to be the capture and spiriting away of children and the violation of young women and girls.
Yikes.
Sometimes a girl about to become a mother will gain an enormous respect by the story of her abduction by the Tinje Rui. The Tinje Rui never invades camps or clearings, but waits outside in the brush to jump on anyone who comes out. Mason, 1924, 58.
So they would say then that there's more than one species of Sasquatch.
I am so right there with Dr. Lauren Coleman. In all the years that I've practiced physical therapy, studied anthropology, studied human anatomy and taught human anatomy at the University of Alaska, and worked with natives, I've never been more certain that there are multiple types of Sasquatches, not just in terms of the names given to them, like the Nanaimo, Salish on Vancouver Island, these are just names. I'm not saying there are different types on this basis. I'm just saying they'll describe different ones. They'll say, Quietlet is a tree striker. Squeenus and Papillus are more like typical Sasquatches. So you have different, those are behavioral differences. So the fear of abduction by children by hair-covered bushmen by any name in the camps from spring through fall, like the abandonment of Portlock, for example. These are some close to Athabascan people.
Which is from the show Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, I think is what it was called.
Well, it has every few years there's a new reenactment of all this. The original information can perhaps best be found in John Green's book. Okay. Among Us. So you can go there. But everywhere you go, Athabascan hunters traditionally went out with a buddy. You did not hunt alone. And that's what we're hearing from a lot of people who are trying to give good advice about this. And, I don't think you have to give up your love of the outdoors or hunting, but it does make good sense in addition to carrying a locator beacon as well to have a partner, so. There's
this one question here up on the screen. Do you think there are more aggressive types than others?
Well, certainly Fred Roll does. And I would have to say that I've got reports of people being helped by some Sasquatches.
Right.
And there are other reports where you won't find, Fred's only got one from north of Dillingham. So north of Anchorage, really only one. Let me just throw a few things at you here that, go back to the 20s and the 30s. Finally, Osgood spoke of the Gwich'in belief in wild men or Na'in. He included another passage from the same book. Many old men living today, this has got to be 36, believe that these wild men, or Na'in, still live in the woods, invisible and hostile to all mankind. A branch of a tree falls on a man, he says, a wild man threw it at me. Or a hunter frustrated by an unusual wary moose thinks, a wild man scared him away so that he could not get him. So now that's a white man, that's a white anthropologist, a non-native anthropologist's perspective on this. There have been only a few anthropologists who have really gotten inside this issue that I think we can take a lot of good info from, and I'll get to that. Richard K. Nelson, the late Richard K. Nelson. His books are in every anthropology department. Make Prayers to the Raven is the one that I think you want to get a hold of in your store. So let's just look at it. A lot of the Na'in or Bushmen were often believed, to have originated from men who'd been cast out of a village for disobeying tribal rules. Anthropologist Wallace noted that in 1998. Similar, if not identical, Sasquatch-like beings have been reported by many to inhabit Alaska's vast taiga in the extreme northwestern spruce forests of Alaska. Between 1969 and 71, anthropologist and much respected ethnographic researcher Richard K. Nelson lived among both the Koyukon peoples at Huslia and Hughes on the Koyukuk River in the northwest interior of Alaska, as well among the Gwich'in in northeast Alaska. By the way, the Gwich'in used to be called Kuchin, but we now call them Gwich'in. Nelson's books are well known and included in many introductory ethno courses today, particularly his 1973 book, Hunters of the Northern Forest, Designs for Survival Among the Alaska Kuchin. Dr. Nelson observantly noted that in addition to names for 50 plants, 24 invertebrates, 16 fish, and 110 species of birds, the Koyukon Dene people also included the Nik'inla'ina, or Nuhu'ant, translated woodsmen, in their list of 38 mammals, I should say. In accordance with their knowledge and worldview, Nelson categorized the woodsman as a subspecies of Homo sapiens, that although with short hair, had a very long, narrow foot with a divergent big toe and was known to be a fast runner. These are the other traits that Nelson collected, living up there and listening to what his one native informant that he knew had claimed to have shot 3 of them, and they didn't want anything to do with them. They terrorized his trap line far too long, and some of those were even females. So what Nelson noted was this: they have the ability to pass the winter in dens, much like a bear, but kind of sleeping more like a dozy person. That the nails would grow long during the winter, long claw-like nails. They produced whistles, yelps, and vocalizations with a. They would steal human artifacts. Their eyes appeared somewhat mongoloid, like an Asian, the teardrop shape, and they had a noxious odor. They would abduct children, stealthy and reserved, but may prowl around camps, cries just like a person. Other Bushman woodsman traits occasionally mentioned, well, those were the main ones, but the occasional ones were maybe killed by a hunter. Woodsman traits occasionally mentioned included could bring bad luck to the hunter and family. Yeah, he mentions a couple of cases where ones were killed. I know of non-natives who, have had that story, that information written down and documented and referred to. John Green talked about that, one or two cases like that, that they would favor certain locales or haunts. They may hypnotize a person.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah. Okay. So generally now we're talking, they didn't talk about mind speak per se, but they said may hypnotize. You'll hear that among a lot of tribal groups. Okay. Generally regarded as a nuisance, but feared by some. Okay. Just like we have some people who just continue going out hunting on their own, and who can blame them? They love nature by themselves. We have other people who have given it up completely. Me, I just say take a partner and a dog. Well, no, don't take a dog unless the dog's going to read.
Take a partner and a gun, maybe.
Yeah, right. But they may play tricks on people. Well, you could ask Tom Powell about that, or or such as draping, or the late Ken Cooper, Sergeant Ken Cooper at Lummi. Rennie DeHendon and I met him when we were looking at the 80 reports on the Nooksack River that happened in 1975. We went across the border, and wow, I've never. One little Lummi woman, she's kind of ticked off at Sergeant Cooper. Sergeant Cooper was a great guy, by the way. Awesome man. He had a conversation with a Sasquatch that was screaming at him just outside his cruiser car window, and he recorded it on the microphone. Have you heard about that?
No.
Okay,
no.
Well, get back to me on that. Some of these things that happened up in Northwest Washington. The Lummi speak Holocomerlum, which is not like Schlehutseed. It's a different whole subfamily of Salish, but they, like the Skagits, they speak a northern Holocomerlum dialect. And Sergeant Cooper led me into, he had a shotgun, and then he had his pistol, his revolver, and he had to step sideways to allow a tribal elder, really heavy-set woman, very strong-looking, quite short, but very, very broad and muscular. Very politely stepped aside as best he could in this narrow, single-wide trailer that was functioning as part of their, tribal offices at the time, just a part of that. And then, of course, Rennie, he had his rifle. He brought it across the border. It could have got me in a lot of trouble. I didn't even know he'd smuggled it.
Yeah.
That guy was a character. I would swear, but I don't want to swear. He swore all the time in his Swiss accent. And so this woman's bristling at him a little bit. This Lummi tribal elder, she's looking at Remy and she's going, Rennie, and she's going, and she's looking at his rifle. She gets to me, and I've just got a huge backpack with plaster Paris and books and collecting bottles and tape recorders, different kinds of cameras. And I have to really, really squeeze sideways to let her pass me. She couldn't. She was just so big, and I had so much stuff. And she grabbed me by the lapel like a green belt in judo, and she puts me up against the wall, and she starts shaking me. And this is what she said to me in front of Sergeant Cooper and Rennie. Why are you always trying to kill these creatures? Why can't you let them eat their mice and berries and be left alone? Bang. And all my stuff was all over the place. And I'm down. I'm on the floor looking up, and I'm, ma'am, wait. Thank you for, tell me more. Mice and berries.
Yeah, you think they need more than mice and berries.
Right. So what I've seen didn't look supernatural, just looked biological. And there's a full description of that in this book, Brushes with Bigfoot. as long as some other really good sketches by eyewitnesses and my own forensic art. I do a police lineup with my witnesses. What did you see? What did it look like? Can you pick something here that resembles it? So usually these are fossil. These are reconstructions of fossil hominids, Neanderthal, Homo erectus, Gigantopithecus, Australopithecus robustus, Paranthropus, various things like that, and occasionally something like a Russian boxer. What is his name? So I would do this, and people would start me with that, and then I'd work there and how much hair and so on. But what I had happen, and this is also in this book, I had two individuals, a native woman, Gladys Natkong, tell me about one she saw while she was fishing.
Interesting.
Off Gravina Island, just treading water, just like 12 yards off her boat, head sticking up. And natives know harbor seals from sea lions, from elephant seals, okay? Because
from Sasquatch, yeah.
Right, and from a Sasquatch. You don't usually see them swimming, but they have been reported by the Simshan just over in Metlakatla, swimming in Nichols Passage as well, using a butterfly stroke. I have reports of them swimming. I've got maybe a dozen reports, using various strokes, but never the crawl, just usually a breaststroke or arms at the side or, or a butterfly. So she's watching this, and it's watching her, and it goes down. And basically, she's got me drawing the sketch. Okay, took me forever to get it. So this was one of the sketches that I included 10 years later.
That's what she saw, she said.
Yeah, that's what she and her nephew saw. So, when they were fishing for salmon off the southeast corner of Gravina Island, and Blank Inlet, Blank Island. And so I included this in the little lineup, that I had of other faces that, people could identify. To Will Miller, a fisherman, captain of his own fishing vessel, who 10 years later, and just a few miles further west and north at Bostwick Inlet, both these sightings were like 100 yards from shore. He picks this out right off the bat and says, "Rob, this is what I saw." What? And I'm thinking, whoa. So he had me draw this up, and I ended up with this, with red eyes. So virtually the same thing. He said the hair was a little more bleached. He was describing it as sun bleached or whatever. And it was also moving against the tide. Fishermen know elephant seals, okay? And they know sea lions and they know seals. And he was looking at it through the binoculars, and it was about, I don't know, less than 40 yards. So he had a good look at it.
This is daytime, I assume.
These are daytime sightings, absolutely. So we're talking 10 years apart and only a few miles away. I presume it was already a full adult, but the research that people are doing with tracks that show up, identical tracks with different scars or maybe a little more wear and tear over a couple of 100 miles, suggests there's migration. In Colorado, you've got to be aware of the fact that wolverines can go right up and down the whole Rocky Mountain chain, if you give them a little space at night. And there are 40,000 wolverines in North America, counting all the Alaskan and Canadian ones. So
how many?
40,000.
40,000. Okay.
Yeah. Now, some people today are saying, Dr. John Bindernagel's, the old ratio of one black bear for every 10,000, one Sasquatch for every 10,000 black bears. When John and I talked, and we both lived on Vancouver Island, we agreed it would be more like one for every 200. And I think I started to feel when I was spending time in Alaska and on the big West Coast rivers that it would actually be more like one Sasquatch for every 100 black bears. And that would tie in with wolf ratios too. So I guesstimated that in Alaska, in Southeast Alaska alone, there'd be 2,000 Sasquatches in all the islands from Prince William Sound down to the Canadian border, up to the Haida land.
Steph, put that one comment up from Warrior of Light about aggression. See what Rob thinks. The ones in Alaska seem way more aggressive, but I feel like it's because everyone is packing there, hunting or just for protection. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've got aggression an EMT firefighter that I worked with, Curtis, and his friend Tanner. I knew them both, and their women, their girlfriends, and Curtis's wife and Tanner's girlfriend got chased off this mountain, round mountain, where I've seen handprints. This mountain, this logging road goes up. It's a wild spot. People see Sasquatches up there fairly regularly. You can say it chased their quads 3.5 miles in
Wow.
7 minutes, and then appeared right where they were loading the quads. It may have taken a shortcut, but it was following them down the logging road that they'd gone up at night, and they'd been running their, these are 2-stroke engines, right? Really loud. And when you're up on top of a mountain at night, you're going to be waking somebody up, okay? Or disturbing their hunt. And so they got chased off the mountain. They actually freaked the women out. They got glimpses of it running behind them. And at times they were pegging their quads. And one quad did 50, the other quad did 60, I think. And it was keeping up. So, I mean,
that's amazing.
I know. Right. Well, when you're 8 feet tall and you're all muscle, forget being 6 foot tall and being able to do 27 miles an hour, as an Olympic athlete. You can just double that. Just go ahead and So yeah, I have no difficulty, and I worked as a trainer. I was at the '88 Winter Olympics. I watched athletes move quickly, and the one I saw in Alaska in 1998 on March 1st at 5 p.m., 12 miles north of Ketchikan, crossing the highway with my kids. That thing, when it made the yellow line, the double yellow line in the middle of the highway. By the way, looked like it could have been a twin brother to the one I'd seen in 75 in BC. This thing, it was like it made the jump to light speed. It was incredible how it went from 3 steps to bang. It's like it was flying. It was like it was actually airborne. In fact, I think it only hit the ground once between the yellow line and the bush. Most of the time it was in the air, it seemed. So, tremendous propulsion. Plus, in this book, you'll get a good look at anatomy that both Dr. Chef Meldrum and I agree is pretty darn interesting, because even Robin Williams, I don't think, could do this with his toes. Can you see how this 8-inch track has
where
3
the
different
toe
types
is spread out?
Right. How the big toe goes right in at 90 degrees. How the second and third toes only flex at the, I can't do it. They can only flex at the distal interphalangeal joint. They're completely extended here. You have to have rheumatoid arthritis to do that. That's called Boutonniere's deformity. Oh yeah. And these guys were completely straight. Go on. How do you do that? Your tendons have to be bundled differently and have different origins.
With a splayed big toe.
Well, you also have that splayed big toe in a lot of reports. Yeah. So we know their anatomy is different. And when I talked with Dr. Krantz, and I was in BC and I spoke with them, and over the years we communicated on occasion. We agreed, it had to be completely different. I was lucky to have Renier de Hinden go out and show me. I mean, he had his opinions, but he showed me a lot of this. He wasn't Bob Titmus, but he really knew his tracks. Okay. And I knew human tracks because I had a degree. Sorry about that. That's how I got upside down. I had, my anthropology and my physical. So I'd been to the medical school in Winnipeg and studied human anatomy and kinesiology and gait, as well as doing all the anthropology of the human the history, the evolution of human gait, as Dr. Meldrum has focused on. So it was interesting, but we learned more. And Doug Hychek and the analysis of single file tracks in northern Minnesota, as well in the snow, where they have a different hip anatomy, and they have to keep their feet, in single file to avoid knocking up against all sorts of other things, and to be able to move quickly and speedily on game or getting away from us. And they know what rifle, right?
If we try to walk like that, we fall down. I mean, it's just It's a crazy gate, this
up-
compliant gate, as they call it.
Right. I think, the Monty Python staff would be calling us for silly walks.
The Ministry of Silly Walks, right?
Right.
There was a question here about, what was it, about bears? Oh, do you think they eat bears? We know they eat deer and elk. Any ideas?
In this book, there's reference to bears mysteriously trying to get the hell out of where a Sasquatch was just seen. Okay, and in Raincoat Sasquatch, my first book, there's an excellent account and the illustration that I drew following the men's description. Two native hunters wounded the bear, couldn't find it at first, had to leave and go back to their camp before they went. Returned to look for the bear in this muskeg. Muskeg is just a floating bog, so Labrador tea and blueberries and like that. And they found, ultimately it took them half the day, but one of the hunters, that I won't use his name, he was amazed. It freaked him right out. He said, "I'm looking between my feet and I could see black fur between pieces of sphagnum moss that had been jigsawed together." So an area of 8 by 4 feet or more had been patched together to conceal in this little muskeg pool, this little cold, icy cold peat, very acidic pool, would be like a refrigerator, the bear, the mother bear that they'd wounded and had since died, was kind of
so
placed.
they think the Sasquatch hit it?
They're out there by themselves. There's nobody else out there. And he said, when he realized it took hands to do this, to put all that moss together like that, his hair stood on end. And they, but so the Tlinkits used to have a couple of different names for Sasquatches. According to elders, Al Jackson, who quoted Mr. Joe Denny, who said, "Hoos flame, which means foot or ankle big." So it's like foot, how they would say a big foot. And this is back in the 30s or 40s. Also, the upside down trees. I never thought I'd see any more of that after I left Alaska. We put in Monsters and Mysteries of Alaska, we looked at these huge trees that were jammed in the ground. But now I discover that in association with Sasquatch tracks, and often enough, not even close to a logging road or a road where equipment could do this, these trees are in various sizes are being found jammed into the ground upside down. It even seems to be reported in other countries. So I assume this is a very basic hominid behavior that is probably related to, I'll say, territory marking. And
brute strength. I'm telling you, the strength to do that.
And
unbelievable.
They eat everything. There's in Brushes with Bigfoot, there's a good account where two men in Washington spent a good number of minutes watching one eat the fish guts that were left over from the day before, from the cleaning that they'd done on the Nassau River at night. The men were admittedly poaching. They were just trying to stay alive. They were just back from Vietnam. It was a tough thing. Also dumpsters, looking through dumpsters. So there's a report here from Chico Milne, Jason Milne in Ketchikan. He was 19 at the time. Now it's 10 years ago, I think. And he watched for 1 second, he thought it was a bear getting into this garbage can at the edge of Ketchikan. You can still go up and see that garbage can. The lid is bent. It's 6 feet of lid, 400 pounds of dumpster, and the two lids, one, 3 feet on one side and 3 feet on the other, are bent at the ends where you would pick the dumpster. You wouldn't pick it up there on the lid. The lids are bent where evidently something tried picking it up by the middle of the lid, bent the stainless steel on the top 1 inch out of true, and didn't lift it by the big handles that the solid waste equipment would grab onto it by. The big handles that are lower down. No, I did not look. Jason and I kicked ourselves. We never looked inside to see what was.
Oh, interesting.
What had attracted it. So my sketch, he said, you draw what I drew, just redraw what I drew. And his original sketch was this, that he drew immediately,
That's pretty good.
in 10 hours. So, yeah, he said it had a V to it. He knew right away it wasn't a bear because it had the dumpster off the ground and it was shaking it. and
I mean, we have reports here, quite a few of here being in the U.S. of Sasquatch raiding dumpsters.
Right. Well, they eat practically everything. So the oldest living Tsimshian gentleman, native Tsimshian gentleman, Mr. John Reese, at the time when I was still living in Ketchikan, shared this story with me that he never shared with anybody, and it's in this book. And basically, that sketch is what he described having seen running away from where they went up and found where the crabs were under the rock. It had been pulling crabs out. It wasn't that big. It was broad-shouldered, though, really broad. And he said it was like a weightlifter. He would have guessed it was 6'5" and maybe 250 pounds. And he was way up the Uinta River. And
there's stories I'm sure you've probably heard of them collecting mussels to eat. And
this one was eating sea urchins. This is a sketch by the witness, Doug Snook. Now, this was soaking wet. And Doug and his pal were on Coast Guard Beach with Doug's mom and Doug's uncle. And they parked their vehicle, and mom and uncle were going to get seaweed. So Doug and his pal took off to the north, at Coast Guard Beach. So they went down. This is below Whipple Creek, where I actually had my sighting, very close to where I had a sighting. So they're at this spot. They're looking down. Can you see there's a reef? Can you see the little reef sticking out?
Yeah.
And the tide goes up and down on that. So they see this black figure on the reef because mom and uncle have gone to the left and they've gone to the right. And they got to this point where they're looking at the reef, but with their naked eyes. And there's this guy, they thought, oh, he's a scuba diver and he's in trouble. He needs help. He's waving. He was doing this.
Oh, interesting.
Looked like he had something purple in his hand. But they couldn't figure out, and he wasn't moving. So was he stuck and too far away to call? But, they thought, wow. So quick, go back to the car, get the binoculars. And Doug comes back down, and they're looking at it with the binoculars, and they can see. He said, oh my gosh, it freaked me right out. It was ugly. It was horrible. Suddenly we realized it's not a guy, even though it's all black. It's dripping wet. It's up to its waist on this reef, and it's huge. It looks big, and it's got something that it's putting up to its mouth and shaking down. Bend over and get something else, and it's purple. We kind of figured out that what it was doing is what other natives have been seen doing when they've got purple sea urchins. You shake the eggs down, and then you can suck them out and get them. That's a delicacy. So it looked like the Sasquatch was eating sea urchin eggs. Of course, they dig clams. I've got reports, all sorts of them digging, like portlock and so on. But the dripping wet Sasquatch that Doug drew a sketch of is right here. And if you look at it closely, you can see a sagittal crest. So that wouldn't be hair. It would have to be the bone itself. Some people have suggested that maybe all sagittal crests are just nothing more than hair, but it would be.
It's not a Sasquatch mohawk.
Right. Although Dr. Meldrum's pointed out that, as have others, that I think Dr. Krantz did, that you could have a big female with a sagittal crest too, because it's really just an anchor for big jaw muscles. It has really nothing to do with the skull.
Interesting. So
and here's the lady who had one. Watch her while she's watching it on Prince of Wales Island. Her name is Judy Kennedy. She's a wonderful, very senior. She and her husband are very senior subsistence natives that live on Prince of Wales Island, and they were at a camp almost alone. Nobody else at that particular camp. It's like a state park, but there was no one else there. She had her little campfire. I think it was Staney Creek, and on the island, where other things have been reported. And her husband Art is asleep, and she's working on the fire. And they've got their Yukon SUV parked, just like 35 feet away. And she notices eyes above the SUV. I don't know if you know how big a Yukon is.
Yeah, they're big. They're big.
And it's looking at her over the top of the Suburban. And she said, oh my gosh, all her brothers and sisters had always seen these things on Prince of Wales Island or Rilla and knew about them, but she never had. I mean, she'd heard things, she'd seen tracks, but she'd never actually seen one. She said, oh my gosh, it's you. I finally get to see you. And she's a wonderful soul if you ever get to meet Judy. I'm finally getting to see you. And she noticed, oh, I guess there's rain clouds coming. I'm starting to look toward her fire. It looked like her fire was starting to go down. I guess I'm going to have to build up the fire. And she pointed toward her fire. And she went and looked at the fire. She didn't point at it. She said that at that time, this Sasquatch that was just standing kind of hiding over the top corner of her Yukon reached out with an arm and pointed his finger at the fire, which I thought was strange. It's almost like people say they can read your mind. Let me tell you something about EEGs. Everybody knows about an EKG. You get the electrodes on your chest and you can see the heart, QRS, ST segment. EEGs, same thing, shave the scalp, put the electrodes on. In physiological research with the whole body, electrodes can be placed on a jig just a centimeter off the surface of the skin and still get the same recording because you have an EM field. You have your own field. The Hindus, of course, would call it chakras and all that sort of thing. Auras, right. So if somehow the musculature, this is just a wild thought. Electric eels use muscles, actin and myosin, to generate their field, but also to be able to read. It's not just the lateral line. They actually use their organ they have an electromagnetic sensorium. Okay. They can feel the EM field of you or a horse or another smaller eel that they would want to eat. And so if they can sense prey out to 30, 40 feet, and they're just an electric eel, if you had that much more actin and myosin and you had a similar organ, theoretically, there's a biological way you could get your radar net set up for being able to read a person's EEG. You'd at least know if they were excited or calm or maybe wanted to shoot you or nervous or whatever. And maybe you could also project an EM field. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple questions for you as I thought of as you've been chatting. One is, there's lots of stories about in Native American oral tradition of abductions of women and children by Sasquatch. And I'm aware of a lot of that in the past. Are you aware of any recent current cases of women or children being abducted?
No, but it's interesting. I know natives, and I won't say what First Nation or tribal group here in the States, that say, oh yeah, dad, 6'7", 8", granddad, he was even bigger, and he came back from the bush. We don't know where she was. She was just in the bush. That's all she said. And this is not like Dr. Ed Fuchs, the geologists work among the Colvilles, the Squinichty. They walked among us. I think Bobby Short did a good job of summarizing that. Bobby and I were friends for a good while and shared a lot of things through Ray Crow and each other. And her work is really good. I like it. Ray Crow also was one of the first guys to say, hey, these are not apes. These are Homo erectus was his favorite. And I like that too. But yeah, I have met people who say, they've got this. It would be neat to just get a cheek swab and send it into 23andMe and see if anybody fell over off their chair in 23andMe. Or maybe Dr. Ketchum could get some work done there. But I do know people who've said this. Now, there was a woman in Juneau, and I'll try to find her again, at one of the airlines who worked at the counter, who is a Canadian, very, very pleasant, very customer-oriented, and very efficient clerk for this company, this local airline company, whose mom and grandmother were born near Fort Simpson or Port Providence, north of the Liard in the Yukon and northern BC. and they are Cascas. This family is Athabasca and they're Casca. She told me her grandma had described a very large being, Nakan. I have to check my list of names to remember. There's so many different names, but they're all variations on N-A, Nakani or Nantinuk. Nahani is actually one that was in the camp, and the men had surrounded it with firearms, and they didn't know, I guess they didn't know whether they had enough firepower to kill it, and just wanted to scare it because it had picked up a 12-year-old girl. And my informant said my grandmother was very clear that, you know, she was young when she watched this, but she said it was 15 feet tall, which matches exactly the height of the individual in the four men described, four construction workers at the Bighorn Dam, Guy Leroux, and three other men, and in John Green's books it's well described. In Alberta, when the Bighorn Dam was being built, they watched this thing for a good long time, and 15 feet was what they, you know,
I can't even imagine 15 feet. That's,
well, I don't know. There's old Scottish stories about
gigantic.
the Grey Man of Ben McGee, up in the Cairngorms, also 15 feet, and of course, you know, you can go. Patrick Hugh, a colleague and co-author of Lauren Coleman's, Patrick Hugh, Mystery Primates Worldwide. There's some references in his book. He lists about 20 hominids, crypto hominids from around the world. He was the first guy to really do this. And I have to admire Lauren Coleman for that. You know, maybe there were only one or two reports, but you have to be a real rebel and a renegade to go out there and say these things. It's almost like an early version of woo, just to say that, you know, there were a whole lot of different types and species. But now, look, we know the skunk ape's different from most Sasquatches, you know, that we see here. There could be a gene pool that's just as crazy and bushy as our human fossil ancestry is. And we used to think it was just a tree going up, but now we know it's all sorts of the anthropologists will say it's more of a bush than it is a tree.
A bush. Well, the other, speaking of trees, brings me to my other question is, there are researchers I know who say that Sasquatch live in the trees. I mean, inside the trees.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Any Christian who's read a Bible will tell you that Jesus is documented in the New Testament as appearing through a wall. He didn't come in the door. Okay. You know, to say that quantum physics isn't possible just runs against the mathematical proof that mathematicians have worked out. It's logical that it would happen. And to look at dimensionality, you know, Ron Moore Quantum Bigfoot. Henry Franzoni, he discusses the physics of this as well as Ron does. They both do. I have great respect for both men. Who hasn't listened to the Sierra Sounds and Samurai Chatter?
Of course.
I've heard that myself, actually. I can tell you, I can reproduce what I heard right here one night. But to look at that and then compare it with, you could find references to this sort of thing in the Talmud, in the Quran, in the writings of Confucius and Buddhist writings, as well as in the Old Testament. Finding, or the New Testament, how many heavens are there? You know, traditional beliefs in different levels of heaven or references to that. So, I mean, you can actually find a Venn diagram that will find some common ground between, you know, what scientists are apparently discovering and what religious traditions have put forward consistently over the thousands of years. So there's that. I'm interested in what Dave Ellis is doing with vocalization and sound spectrography. I'm familiar with it as a clinician. I was a drugless practitioner in Ontario, Canada, and it's great that we can use technologies that have helped people learn to speak, speech therapists, and have been using this. So looking at, I guess President Nixon got convicted on the basis of something like this, you can identify an individual. And so using that, getting recorders out all over the place, you could start to figure out, hey, how far can they move and how fast? An hour, you've got to start thinking about quantum physics, right? So it gives a person a chance who's a researcher who likes biology, likes working with the known world, doesn't want the woo, and can focus on, let me look at the tracks. Yeah, they seem like the same individual. Dave Ellis's work, Chris Spencer, I think Paul Graves, all of these people worked with Monongahela to develop, who was BFRO at the time, to develop sound spectrography as applied to Sasquatch research. And if you combine that with what Dr. Meldrum is doing with tracks and dermatoglyphics, yeah, Wrinklefoot, isn't that a great track?
Wrinklefoot, yeah.
Yeah, we found, there's the little Wrinklefoot, looks like Wrinklefoot's little sister, found by a wonderful woman who lived in Ione, near Tiger or Ione, near Medellin Falls, until her passing just a few years ago. Her family, and Cliff Barrickman was fortunate in being able to get a hold of this other smaller track. I think Laura told me she actually put her hand in it, so we see a handprint in it. But it's smaller than Wrinklefoot, but it has all the same exact abduction patterns, and the toes are all. It just looks perfect. It looks like son of Wrinklefoot or daughter of Wrinklefoot. It makes you wonder. 200 miles and how many years?
Right.
40. Genetic flow. Where?
Interesting.
What are these Sasquatches doing as far as genetics go? Are there clans? It seems like anybody who does the woo will say, yeah, they have clans and they live under rules that they have to behave and they can't kill us or something like. But there are bad ones, whether they're renegades. To me, there are good Sasquatches and bad Sasquatches.
Just like there are good people and bad people.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. So good Sasquatches and bad Sasquatches. Yes, in the sense that within any one population, you can have individuals that are, they're teenagers and they're getting in trouble but they're not trying to kill people. Okay. And I'd be right there with a lot of natives who said, no, they're there. They're not trying to kill people. They might abduct girls, but they're not trying to kill people. It's not I don't think it's an alternative to missing 411.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think, I would agree with Dave Paulides that I don't see evidence for that. But at the same time, you've got to consider that here's a simple one. Try this for size. There are Sasquatches that are biological. There are people that are biological. And there's some people walking around who seem to be a little more than biological, Of course, there was Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler, but you've got, so you've got a spectrum. But what I'm going to suggest is if you've got tracks that suddenly start somewhere without a beginning, like poof, they're there, and you follow them and then they disappear, and you and other researchers can't find a single explanation for, was it a helicopter that came?
Yeah, exactly.
Was it a paramedic? Was it an extraction? Were they using a jungle extractor to take doing research? Does Joint Base Lewis McChord have time to do this sort of thing, or other military bases? So you've got stuff that the people don't want to talk about. That's the elephant in the room, and that's fine, because we need to periodically, even if we're not in front of a TV camera, get together with other people, especially when no one's looking, so woo people can go, ask some questions about the hard biological aspects of this with people who are really solid on the hard biology. And maybe people who are solid on hard biology can go, have there ever been any reports of something like, they might have a question that they want to ask. So it's kind of important that we at least know where to find each other, or where those conferences are. And especially, Jim, that Colorado conference that you and I were at.
That you came to? Yeah.
Dave Paulides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Well, and if Dave hadn't moved to Montana, we would probably still be organizing conferences together. So
he's great.
He's a little far away to do it now, but I have done one with him up there, but no, he's great. He's a great friend.
Right.
Well, Rob, I am so grateful that you came on today and have given us some of your perspectives on the Sasquatch.
It wasn't just garbage.
Yeah.
So there are some other things in my next book. There are people who've had stories that I find credible for a whole lot of reasons. And this particular air conditioning instructor and technician, who is in Washington now, but at the time he was up on Edelin Island, and he had an interesting encounter with an adult male Sasquatch that let you wonder about this. That also the fact that they do have family units, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say we've lost Woody Anderson, but he gave in Monsters and Mysteries of Alaska, Woody and his son gave a good description of what they saw outside the car. In the documentary, they just did the reconstruction on the big male, but the fact that there was a little kid there as well was interesting. Also, in my next book, I'm going to be discussing behavior. This male Sasquatch, seen by the helicopter logging crew, refusing to leave the forest and waving at his apparent wife and kids who are running out, in a panic just to get him back. So yeah, we have some things. Plus, before I go, I want to say, I think there's been one report of a Sasquatch seen hitting a tree. Okay.
Actually seen doing it. Yeah.
And you asked me, could Sasquatches be an orb? Well, that's pure energy, right? I guess we need to get some Tesla coils going. Maybe we need to go to the House of Mystery. Maybe we need to all meet. But
yes,
yes. I don't think the wood knocks. I've always thought that there's a biological explanation. You don't have to go to orbs. Not that couldn't be. I'm just saying, if something materializes or dematerializes, it's going to leave a vacuum if it's dematerializing. And of course, a grouse, boom, 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 with the wings, you can get that vacuum effect and you can get that kind of sound. But even in northern Alaska, they don't have trees. And so, Jim, you can't make that wood knock with a tree. So what the natives say is, well, we think they've stolen some guns. Okay. That's what they used to say. But I've got a simpler explanation or theory, and it's this. And I'm a little skinny guy. I'm only 5'9", and I look at I don't have great big meaty Sasquatch hands. That's 8 inches from there to there, so it's not really very far. But if I do this, if I pull my palms back, the first one was close, but the second two were lousy. But you know what I'm saying? If you have big hands, it would sound like a 308 or a 30-06 or a 338.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be a good explanation for that, if they're not materializing or dematerializing. Well, we talked about a little bit about everything.
Yeah. Which is great. Great.
Make Prayers to the Raven is a book that I think if Fred doesn't, you're going to want to share that one with Fred. But the chapter on Bushmen in Make Prayers with the Raven. See if you can order it from the University of Chicago Press.
Make Prayers to the Raven.
Yep, it's a great anthropology by the late Dr. Nelson. So,
well, thank you very much, Rob, for being with us this evening.
And Dr. Reconstruction of Meganthropus says thank you as well. Okay.
And next Tuesday, I'm going to have Fred Roll on, and we're going to be talking about some of the more frightening parts of Sasquatch's personality when they come after us. And it's going to be a very, very entertaining show with, I'm sure, lots of questions from you guys. But thank you for being with us tonight, Rob. Very much appreciate your time. I know your time is precious, and
I'm off to Saturday.
Are you?
I am.
Awesome.
I don't stop.
Well, have a great trip and be safe.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll look forward to getting together with you at a conference one time.
I hope so.
All right.
Thanks, Rob.
Night.
Good night. So thank you to Rob. Thank you to all of you for being with us tonight. You're going to want to be tuning in next week to hear Fred's stories. Very, very frightening stories, which have really given me a lot of room to reflect about Sasquatch, at least Sasquatch in Alaska, as we were mentioning in the chat. So good show, lots of material to think through. And until next week, keep on squatching.